Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
That afternoon, I was supposed to meet my friend at this mid-range hotel downtown. She was staying there for a work conference, and we'd planned to grab lunch together once she finished her morning sessions. I got there about 15 minutes early because I'm one of those people who'd rather wait than be late. The lobby was nice enough, nothing fancy, but clean and modern. There was a proper front desk on the left side with a staff behind it, all wearing these navy blazers with the hotel logo and name tags. On the right side near the elevators, there was this open seating area with a high counter table and a few chairs. I grabbed one of the chairs at the counter, dropped my backpack on the floor, and pulled out my phone. I was wearing black pants and a white button-up shirt because I had a client meeting scheduled for later that afternoon. Nothing fancy, just my usual work attire. I started scrolling through Instagram, checking out some design inspiration posts, and texting my friend to see if she was almost ready. I'd been sitting there for maybe 5 minutes when this guy came storming across the lobby. He was probably in his late 40s, balding, wearing khaki shorts, and a polo shirt that looked like it had seen better days. He had this red-faced, irritated expression that made it clear he was already in a mood about something. He walked right up to me, didn't even say hello or excuse me, just barked out that he needed extra towels in room 402 right now. His tone was demanding, like I was supposed to drop everything and run to fulfill his order immediately. I looked up from my phone, genuinely confused for a second. I smiled politely because that's just my automatic response to people, even rude ones. I told him sorry, but I didn't work there. He stopped, narrowed his eyes, and looked me up and down like I was lying to him. His face got even redder. He demanded to know why I was standing behind the desk if I didn't work there. I almost laughed. Standing? I was sitting. And behind what desk? I looked around to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Nope. I was sitting at a counter table with chairs in a public seating area, clearly not behind any kind of employee station. I explained that I wasn't standing behind a desk at all. This was just a chair in the lobby, and I was waiting for someone. He crossed his arms and huffed, like I was being difficult on purpose. He insisted that I looked like I worked there. I stood up slowly, picked up my backpack from the floor, and held it up so he could see it. It was a regular black canvas backpack with pins and patches all over it. Definitely not something an employee would carry while working. I told him that this was just a chair, not his personal helpline, and I was literally just sitting there on my phone. His face went from red to almost purple. He sputtered for a second, clearly not used to being told no, then turned on his heel and stomped over to the actual front desk. I could hear him from where I was standing. He loudly announced that he wanted to file a complaint because one of their employees had just ignored him and refused to help. The front desk clerk, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a neat bun and wearing the navy blazer with a name tag that said Jessica, looked up at him with this perfectly polite but slightly confused expression. She apologized and asked which employee he was referring to. He pointed directly at me and said it was the one sitting over there. I waved awkwardly because what else was I supposed to do? The clerk looked at me, then back at him, and I could see her trying not to smile. She explained very clearly that I didn't work there, that I was a guest waiting in the lobby. She pointed out that their staff all wore navy blazers with name tags and were stationed behind the desk or in other designated areas. He argued that I should have helped him anyway, since I was just sitting there doing nothing. The clerk's voice stayed professional, but there was definitely an edge to it now. She told him that even if I did work there, snapping at people and demanding things wasn't how you get towels or anything else for that matter. He got even more worked up and insisted that this was ridiculous. He was a paying guest and he demanded better service. Just then, a woman came rushing over from the elevator area. She was wearing a floral sundress and carrying a shopping bag, and she looked absolutely mortified. She grabbed the guy's arm and pulled him back slightly, asking what he was doing. He complained that the hotel had terrible service. He said their employee had refused to help him, and now this clerk was being disrespectful. The woman closed her eyes for a second like she was counting to 10, then opened them and looked directly at me. She asked if I had refused to help him. I told her that I'd simply explained I didn't work there and that I was just waiting for a friend. She turned back to her husband and smacked his arm. Not hard, but definitely enough to get his attention. She told him plainly that he was embarrassing her again. He asked what he'd done wrong, insisting he just wanted towels. She pointed out that the front desk was clearly marked with a sign and there were people wearing uniforms. She asked how he could have possibly thought I worked there. He defended himself by saying I was dressed professionally. She shot back that I was wearing a backpack and sitting in the lobby chairs. She begged him to just apologize and ask the actual staff for towels like a normal person. He opened his mouth like he was going to argue, but she gave him this look that made him stop. He deflated a bit, mumbled something that might have been an apology in my general direction, then turned back to the front desk clerk. His tone was much quieter now when he asked for towels in room 402. The clerk smiled sweetly and told him, of course, that she'd have housekeeping bring them up right away. She asked him to allow 15 to 20 minutes. His irritation flared up again when he complained that 20 minutes was ridiculous. His wife cut him off and said it was fine. She thanked the clerk and apologized for the confusion. She dragged him toward the elevators while he continued grumbling under his breath. The clerk caught my eye and we both started laughing once they were out of earshot. She apologized for what had happened, saying some people just refused to pay attention to anything around them. I told her not to worry about it, and that at least his wife had set him straight. The clerk laughed and said, oh, this wasn't the first time she'd had to do that. She mentioned they'd checked in yesterday, and he'd already complained about 3 different things that weren't actually problems. I said that sounded exhausting. She agreed and said, I had no idea. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend saying she was on her way down. I thanked the clerk for handling the situation so well and went back to my chair to wait. About 2 minutes later, my friend came out of the elevator and we headed out for lunch. The whole thing was so absurd that I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm 24 years old, and I grew up as the middle child between 2 sisters. If you grew up with siblings, you know the drill. Everything gets shared. Every snack, every meal, every single thing that came into the house was automatically up for grabs. My older sister would snatch food off my plate without asking, and my younger sister would throw a fit if she didn't get exactly what I had. My parents always made me share, always told me to be the bigger person, always said it wasn't fair for me to have something when my sisters didn't. I love my family, but I spent my entire childhood never really having anything that was just mine. My husband is 27, and he grew up completely different from me. He was an only child. His parents doted on him, never made him split his food with anyone, never told him he was being selfish for wanting to keep what was his. He doesn't understand what it's like to constantly have to give up what you want for someone else. We've been married for 2 years now, and last year, his father passed away suddenly. It was really hard on everyone, especially my mother-in-law. She's in her 70s and retired, and after her husband died, she realized she couldn't keep up with their big house anymore. The place was too big, too expensive, too empty without him, so she sold it and moved into our basement. We converted it into a nice little apartment for her with a bedroom, bathroom, and small kitchenette. She's not paying rent, which we're totally fine with. She's family and she needed help. Most of the time, we all do our own thing. We each cook our own meals and eat separately. It's not like we're this big family that sits down for dinner together every night. Maybe once a week I'll feel inspired to make a big meal and invite her up, or she'll offer to cook something for all of us. Otherwise, we keep to ourselves, which honestly works out well. But here's the problem that's been driving me absolutely crazy. Every single time I bring home takeout for myself or for my husband and me, he immediately offers it to his mother. Every single time. Look, I wouldn't mind picking up an extra meal for her if I knew ahead of time. I could budget for it. I could order something she'd like, whatever. But when I've specifically bought food for myself, something I've been craving and looking forward to all day, and he just gives it away without asking me, that really gets under my skin. I've tried to brush it off. I've tried to be understanding. I know he's just being a good son, trying to include his mother, but it's like he doesn't even consider that Maybe I bought that food because I wanted it. Not because I wanted to share it. Because I wanted it. Last week it all came to a head. I have been craving Italian food for days. Not just any Italian food. Stuffed shells specifically. There's this local Italian place that makes them perfectly. The pasta is tender, the ricotta filling is creamy and seasoned just right, and they smother it in marinara and mozzarella. My mouth had been watering thinking about it for 3 days straight. Finally, my husband and I agreed to go pick something up from there. I ordered my stuffed shells. The dish comes with 2 large ones, which is the perfect amount for me. He got chicken parmesan, which I don't really care for. We drove home, and I was practically bouncing in my seat with excitement. I could already taste those shells. We walked in the door, bags of food in hand, and I started getting plates out. Before I could even open my container, my husband called down to the basement and asked his mother if she wanted some of the Italian food we had picked up. I felt my stomach drop. Here we go again. I tried to stay calm and told him that I had only gotten enough for the 2 of us. His mother came upstairs, and I could tell she was interested. She said it smelled wonderful and asked what we had gotten. My husband told her he had chicken parmesan and I had stuffed shells, then said she could have some of ours. I felt that familiar frustration building in my chest, the same feeling I had my entire childhood when I had to watch my sisters eat the food I wanted. I told him that she could have some of his if she wanted, but I wanted mine for myself. The room got quiet. My husband turned to look at me and I could see his expression change. He asked me if I was serious and said I wasn't going to eat both of those shells. I told him the dish only had 2 shells, and yes, I was going to eat both. He called me stingy and said it was just food. My mother-in-law looked uncomfortable. I felt bad, but I also felt angry. Why was I the bad guy for wanting to eat the food I bought? She tried to smooth things over and said it was okay, that she could just have some of my husband's dish. But my husband said no, that it was fine. And then he did it. He walked over to my plate, picked up one of my stuffed shells with a serving spoon and put it on a plate for his mother. He told her to enjoy it. I just stood there staring at my plate. My one remaining stuffed shell looked lonely and sad. I felt my appetite disappearing, replaced by anger and hurt. We all sat down and ate in awkward silence. I finished my single stuffed shell in about 4 bites. I was still hungry. My stomach was literally growling, but I felt too upset to say anything. My husband noticed and told me I could have some of his if I was still hungry. I reminded him that he knew I didn't like chicken parmesan. He shot back that maybe I shouldn't be so stingy next time. I didn't respond. I just got up, put my plate in the sink, and went to our bedroom. I could hear them talking quietly in the kitchen, probably about me. Later that night, after his mother went back downstairs, he came into the bedroom and told me I had really embarrassed him. I asked him how I had embarrassed him when he was the one who gave away half my dinner without even asking me. He said she was his mother, that she lived here, and that we were supposed to share with her. I told him to share his own food then, not mine. I explained that I had spent my entire childhood being forced to share everything I had, and now I was an adult. I had bought that food for myself and he had no right to give it away. He dismissed my feelings and said it was just food, that I was acting like a child. I fired back that he was treating me like a child, like my feelings and my wants didn't matter, like I was being selfish for wanting something that was mine. He didn't have a response to that. He just huffed and told me I was overreacting, then went to take a shower. The next day, I went back to that Italian place by myself. I ordered the stuffed shells again, brought them home and ate them in our bedroom with the door locked. Both of them. They were delicious, and they were all mine. My mother-in-law hasn't mentioned the incident, but I've noticed she's been extra quiet when I'm around. My husband keeps making passive-aggressive comments about me being selfish. A few days later, I came home from work to find my husband and his mother sitting at the kitchen table. They both looked at me when I walked in, and I could tell they had been talking about something serious. My husband said they needed to have a conversation with me about my attitude lately. I asked what he meant, even though I had a pretty good idea where this was going. His mother jumped in and said she didn't want to cause any problems between us. She said she appreciated everything we had done for her, but she could tell I wasn't happy with the living situation. I felt terrible. I told her that wasn't true at all, that I was happy to have her there and that she wasn't the problem. My husband cut me off and said that clearly I was the problem since I couldn't even share a simple meal with his mother. He said his father had just died and his mother was grieving, and the least I could do was be generous and welcoming. That stung. I felt my eyes getting hot with tears, but I refused to cry in front of them. I told him that this had nothing to do with his mother or her grief, and everything to do with him not respecting my boundaries. I said I had never once complained about her living with us, about cooking for her, about helping her adjust. All I had asked was to keep the one meal I had bought for myself. He rolled his eyes and said I was being dramatic. His mother looked between us and said maybe she should look into getting her own place. I immediately told her no, that she didn't need to do that. I looked at my husband and said that what needed to happen was that he needed to stop giving away my food without asking me first. My husband stood up from the table and said he was done with this conversation. He said I was being ridiculous and selfish and that he didn't even recognize me anymore. Then he grabbed his keys and left. I sat there with his mother in uncomfortable silence for a moment. She finally spoke up and said she was sorry, that she hadn't meant to eat my food that night. She said my husband had just put it on her plate and she hadn't wanted to make a scene. I told her I knew and that I wasn't mad at her at all. I explained my whole childhood to her, about growing up with sisters and never having anything to myself. I told her I knew it probably seemed silly to get upset over food, but it was about more than that. It was about feeling like my husband didn't care about what I wanted. She nodded and said she understood more than I knew. She told me that when she was first married to my husband's father, he used to do similar things. He would make decisions without consulting her, would volunteer her time without asking, would promise her things to other people. She said it had taken years of arguments before he finally learned to ask her first. I asked her what made him finally change. She said she had to put her foot down. She told me that one day she had just had enough, and she told him that if he couldn't respect her as an equal partner in their marriage, then maybe they needed to reconsider things. She said it was the hardest conversation she'd ever had, but it worked. He started asking her opinion, stopped making decisions for her, treated her like the adult she was. Her words stuck with me. When my husband came home later that night, I was ready. He tried to just go straight to bed without talking, but I stopped him. I told him we needed to talk right now. He sighed and asked what I wanted. I told him that I loved him, but that things needed to change. I said I wasn't going to spend my marriage feeling like my wants and needs didn't matter. I explained that every time he gave away my food without asking, it made me feel like he didn't respect me or care about what I wanted. I said it might seem small to him, but it was a pattern of him making decisions for me instead of with me. He tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told him that if he wanted to share food with his mother, that was fine, but he needed to share his own food or ask me first if I was willing to share mine. I said I needed him to respect my boundaries and treat me like an equal partner, not like a child who didn't get a say in things. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he hadn't realized it was that big of a deal to me. I told him that was part of the problem. He hadn't bothered to realize it because he hadn't asked or paid attention to how I felt. He sat down on the bed and admitted that maybe he had been dismissive of my feelings. He said he had just been trying to be a good son and make sure his mother felt welcome and included. I sat down next to him and said I understood that, and that I thought he was a good son. But I told him he was also a husband, and he needed to consider my feelings too. I said we were supposed to be a team, and teams communicate and respect each other. He finally nodded and apologized. He said he would do better about asking me before offering my food to anyone else, and that he would try to be more aware of when he was making decisions for me instead of with me. I accepted his apology, but I also told him that I would be holding him to it. I said if this pattern continued, we would need to go to counseling because I wasn't going to live like this. The next weekend, my husband surprised me. He took me back to that Italian restaurant and told me to order whatever I wanted, multiple dishes if I felt like it. He said he was buying, and that it was all for me, no sharing required. I ordered the stuffed shells again plus an appetizer and dessert. We brought it all home, and when his mother asked what smelled good, My husband told her we had gotten food just for ourselves, but that he would be happy to take her out for Italian food the next day if she wanted. She smiled and said that sounded lovely. I ate every single bite of my food, and it was perfect. I was doing my usual rounds at the store I work at, checking on the cashiers, making sure the floor was clean, helping customers find items. It was around 3 p.m. right after the lunch rush, but before the after-work crowd. The store was moderately busy, nothing we couldn't handle. I noticed this older woman near the produce section. She was using one of those motorized shopping carts we keep for customers who need them. She moved slowly, carefully selecting items and placing them in her cart. I could tell she was taking her time reading labels, checking prices. Her cart was getting pretty full, and I figured she'd been shopping for a while. Maybe she only got out once a week or so to do a big shopping trip. About an hour later, I saw her making her way toward the checkout area. Her cart was loaded with groceries now. I could see packages of chicken, ground beef, a gallon of milk, bread, canned goods, fresh vegetables, frozen meals. It looked like she was stocking up for at least a couple weeks. She got in line behind 2 other customers at register 4. I was standing near the customer service desk processing a return for another customer when I heard a commotion. I looked up and saw this woman, probably in her 40s, strutting toward the checkout area with a small basket. She had this air about her, like she owned the place. She walked right past the line and positioned herself in front of the woman with the motorized cart. Just cut straight in front of her like she wasn't even there. The woman in the motorized cart spoke up politely, pointing out that there was a line and gesturing to the people who had been waiting. But then this other woman, I'll call her Karen, she reached into the motorized cart and grabbed a package of chicken breasts, just took it right out and put it in her own basket. The woman asked her what she thought she was doing, her voice rising with confusion and shock. Karen held up one finger to her lips in this really condescending way and told her to be quiet, claiming she was in a hurry. Then she reached back into the cart and grabbed the gallon of milk, then a package of ground beef, then some cheese. The woman in the motorized cart was getting really upset now, telling Karen to stop taking her things and explaining that she'd been shopping for 2 hours. Her voice was shaking. She tried to grab the milk back, but Karen just turned her body away. Karen insisted again that the woman be quiet, dismissing her complaints by saying she could get more items and claiming she needed these things right now. The woman called out loudly for an employee to help her, her voice desperate and embarrassed. That's when I dropped what I was doing and headed over. My co-worker Jessica, one of the cashiers, had already pressed the button to call for a manager. I got there just when my manager, Steve, arrived from the back office. I asked what was going on, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. The woman in the motorized cart quickly explained that this other woman had cut in front of her and was taking items out of her cart. Her hands were trembling when she pointed at Karen. Karen denied it smoothly, saying the woman was confused and that these were her own items. She said it like she actually believed it, like we were all stupid. I told Karen that I had seen her take items from the other woman's cart and that she needed to put them back immediately. Karen insisted I had seen wrong and demanded that I ring her up, claiming she had places to be. Her tone was impatient and rude. There were 4 or 5 people in line now, all watching this unfold. One guy, probably in his 30s, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, stepped forward and called out Karen's lie. He said he'd watched the whole thing, describing how she'd walked up, cut the line, and started going through the other woman's cart like it was a buffet. Then he called her a bum. The word hung in the air for a second. Karen's face went red. She demanded to know what he'd just called her, her voice shrill with anger. The man repeated it calmly, saying a bum was exactly what she was. He explained that someone who steals from disabled people deserved that title. That it happened so fast I almost didn't process it. Karen swung her arm and slapped the guy right across the face. The sound echoed through the checkout area. Everyone gasped. The man didn't even flinch though. He just looked at her with this calm expression and said she'd just assaulted him. Karen shot back that he'd insulted her first, like that justified what she'd done. The man explained calmly that insulting someone wasn't illegal, but assault was. Then he reached into his pocket, and pulled out a badge. He identified himself as an officer with the Metro Police Department and explained that while he was off duty, he was placing her under arrest for assault. His voice was professional and steady. Karen's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds. She protested that he couldn't arrest her and that she'd barely touched him. Her voice was getting higher and more panicked. The officer told her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. His tone left no room for argument. Karen said it was ridiculous and demanded to speak to his supervisor, still trying to argue her way out of the situation. The officer told her she could do that at the station and repeated his instruction for her to turn around. Karen tried to back away, but the officer was already moving. In one smooth motion, he had her turned around with her face pressed against the checkout counter. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs from somewhere. I guess he carried them even off duty, and cuffed her wrists. Karen yelled at him to get off her, claiming he was hurting her and shouting about police brutality. Her voice echoed through the whole store. The officer advised her that she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. Then he continued reading her rights, explaining she had the right to an attorney and that one would be provided if she couldn't afford one. He continued the Miranda warning while she squirmed and yelled. Steve had already called 911, and within about 5 minutes, 2 uniformed officers arrived. The off-duty officer showed them his badge and explained the situation. Multiple witnesses, including myself, confirmed what happened. The officers took over from there, and Karen was escorted out of the store in handcuffs, still yelling about lawsuits and discrimination and how this was all a misunderstanding. Several customers had their phones out recording the whole thing. After they left, I turned to the woman in the motorized cart. She looked shaken. I asked if she was okay, keeping my voice gentle. She said she thought so, but seemed confused and upset. She explained she'd just wanted to do her shopping and couldn't understand why that woman thought she could just take her things. Her voice was quiet and tired. I told her that some people think rules don't apply to them and apologized for what had happened. Then I offered to ring her up personally and give her a discount for her trouble. She thanked me, saying that was very kind. The off-duty officer came back in after giving his statement to the other officers. He explained that he needed to give his contact information for the store's incident report and would need statements from witnesses. I told him, of course, and thanked him for stepping in the way he did. He said he was just doing his job, though. He admitted that in 10 years on the force, he'd never had someone assault him while he was buying groceries. He actually smiled a little at that. We got the woman checked out with a 20% discount on her entire purchase. The officer helped her load the groceries into her car. Several other customers who witnessed everything stayed to give statements. Later that evening, Steve told me he'd permanently banned Karen from the store. Apparently, she'd been known to complain a lot and demand special treatment, but this was way over the line. He said the company's legal team would be supporting the assault charges fully. The next day, the off-duty officer came back to do his regular shopping. He told me Karen had been charged with assault, theft, and disorderly conduct. With all the witness statements and phone recordings, it was pretty much an open and shut case. I've struggled with my skin for years. I'm talking painful cystic acne that started when I was 13 and didn't let up until I was well into my 20s. I tried everything: drugstore products, dermatologist visits, prescription creams that made my face peel like a snake shedding its skin. Nothing worked consistently. I spent so much money and time feeling frustrated and embarrassed. There were days I didn't want to leave my house because my face hurt so badly. About 2 years ago, I finally found a routine that worked. It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't easy. I researched for months, reading reviews, watching videos, joining forums. I tested products one at a time so I'd know exactly what was helping and what wasn't. I kept a journal tracking my skin's progress. It was a whole process, but eventually I built this perfect collection of products that cleared my skin up. My bathroom shelf became my pride and joy. Everything was organized. Everything had its purpose. And for the first time in over a decade, I could look in the mirror without wanting to cry. The products weren't just expensive because they were fancy. They were expensive because they actually worked for my specific skin type and issues. Some of them I had to order from overseas. One serum I use costs $70. and takes 3 weeks to arrive from South Korea, but it's worth every penny because my skin finally looks and feels healthy. Now I have this friend from college. We'll call her Karen because, well, you'll see why. We used to be pretty close, but after graduation we drifted apart. She reached out a few months ago wanting to reconnect, and I figured why not. Maybe we'd pick up where we left off. She came over last Tuesday for what I thought would be a normal catch-up session. Coffee, snacks, chatting about our lives. Everything was going fine until she asked to use my bathroom. She was in there for a while. Like, longer than necessary? I didn't think much of it at first, but then she came out with this weird expression on her face. She looked at me with wide eyes and said, my skin looked amazing. She wanted to know what happened. I thanked her and explained that I'd finally figured out a routine that worked for me. Then she said she needed to see what I was using. Before I could say anything, she was already heading back toward the bathroom. I followed her because something about her tone made me uneasy. She stood in front of my shelf, eyes wide, picking up bottles and examining them like she was at a shopping mall. She commented on how much stuff I had and said it must have cost a fortune. I confirmed that I'd invested in my skin and told her it took a long time to find what works. She was quiet for a moment, still looking at everything. Then she turned to me with this smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She said my skin was already great and asked if she could take a few things. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. I asked her what she meant. She clarified that I clearly didn't need all of this anymore since my skin was perfect now. She said she could really use some help with hers. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. I told her I couldn't just give her my products. I explained that my skin looks good because I use them. She pointed out that I had so many and surely I could spare a few. She reminded me that she was my friend. I explained that these weren't extras and that I use everything on that shelf. It's my routine. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. She told me not to be selfish and reminded me how expensive this stuff is. She said she couldn't afford it right now and asked if I'd really make her go out and buy all new products when I had perfectly good ones sitting right here. I said yes, because they're mine. I bought them for myself. She said wow and told me she couldn't believe I was being like this. I asked her what she meant by being like this. Was it not giving away hundreds of dollars worth of skincare? She said it wasn't that big of a deal and accused me of acting like she'd asked for my kidney. I explained that she was asking for products I'd saved up for and specifically chose for my skin. That was a big deal to me. She crossed her arms and got this pouty look on her face. She said she just thought since we were friends, I'd want to help her out. She guessed she was wrong about me. I told her that helping her out would be recommending products or telling her what worked for me, not giving her my actual products. She said whatever and told me to forget. She asked, but she didn't forget. She kept making these passive-aggressive comments for the next 20 minutes. She said it must be nice to be able to afford all that stuff. She said she remembered when I used to share things with my friends. She insisted she would never say no if I needed something from her. Finally, I'd had enough. I told her she needed to leave. She asked me what I meant. I said she heard me. She came into my home, went through my things, and then tried to guilt-trip me into giving them to her. That wasn't okay. She argued that she wasn't going through my things. She was just looking at my skincare. I pointed out that she did it without permission and then demanded I give some to her. She claimed she didn't demand anything. She asked nicely. I reminded her that I said no, but she kept pushing. So now I was asking her to leave. She grabbed her bag with this offended expression. She told me I'd changed. I used to be cool. Now I was just materialistic and selfish. I asked her if I was materialistic because I wouldn't give away things I bought with my own money, things I need for my skin condition. I told her that was rich coming from someone who invited themselves over and immediately started asking for free stuff. She said it wasn't like I needed all of it. I corrected her and said, actually, I do. That's literally how skincare routines work. You use the products consistently. That's the whole point. She huffed and headed toward the door. But before she left, she turned around one more time. She said fine, she'd just buy her own products, but I shouldn't come crying to her when I need something. I told her trust me, I won't. She slammed the door on her way out. I stood there for a minute, kind of shocked by what just happened. Then I went back to my bathroom to make sure everything was still there. She hadn't taken anything, thankfully, but knowing she'd been in there alone made me uncomfortable. The next day, she posted something on social media about fake friends who won't help you when you're struggling. No names, but it was obviously about me. A few mutual friends reached out asking what happened. When I explained the situation, they all said the same thing: she was completely out of line. One friend told me that Karen had pulled similar stunts with other people. Apparently, she had a habit of admiring people's things and then expecting them to just hand stuff over. Designer bags, clothes, electronics. One person said she came over, saw their new tablet, and asked to borrow it indefinitely. I felt kind of stupid for not seeing it sooner. Looking back, there were signs, but I'd written them off as quirks or jokes. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.